Get started. We're really glad everyone was able to grab a quick bite and some refreshments. I know these conference days can get really long, so we're happy to support with some nourishment for you all for this next hour and a half long presentation. So we'll get started here in just a moment. As I shared earlier, we do have a really jam-packed, exciting program. And so we're going to do our best to keep things moving and flowing so we're on time. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Sunshine Manning. I'm Noah and Nama, and a citizen of the Shoshone-Paiute tribes of the Duck Valley Indian Reservation in Idaho and Nevada. And I'm also Chippewa Cree of Rocky Boy, Montana, and Hopi of Second Mesa. And I'm also the Director of Communications for NDN Collective, and it is my honor and pleasure to invite you all to our panel where we get to feature some of our radical imagination artists from our 5th cohort of grantees. And these are Indigenous people from a variety of Indigenous nations, tribal nations across Turtle Island and surrounding nations, island nations of Hawaii and Guam. And in our presentation today, we're going to get to hear a number of different things, including an opening message from NDN Collective's president and CEO, Nick Tilson, the mastermind behind our work, and who's really led us in doing some of the most groundbreaking work ever seen across Indian country. We'll also get to hear a beautiful opening song and chant from one of our Radical Imagination grantees, Havane Rios. And we're also going to invite up one of the executive directors of the American Indian Center where we are today. We want to show our appreciation and gratitude to them for allowing us to host this event here. We'll get to see a couple of different artist presentations, and then we'll close out with an artist panel. And a reminder, if you guys get a little bit of time before you go, you can still check out that gallery just as you head out. But with that, I just also want to quickly acknowledge the space that we're in and these lands that we're on. At NDN Collective, we're comprised of a staff of over 100 Indigenous people from across this land and surrounding island nations as well. And as we do our work and we move about various different lands, it's always so critical for us to acknowledge the homelands that we stand upon. And so we are upon the lands of the Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Potawatomi people. And Chicago also has a really unique history as one of the urban centers where Indigenous people, Native Americans in particular, were relocated as an act of the federal government with the federal Indian policy of Indian relocation, where we were kind of enticed to leave our homeland so that they can get to more of our lands and resources. Indigenous people were moved to places like Chicago as a part of that act. And so Chicago is also home to several different Indigenous people who are part of that relocation program. And so we just want to give thanks to these lands, the ancestors of these lands, the people who have prayed at these waters since time immemorial. But with that, I just want to say thank you again so much for being here, and we'll kick things off with a chant from Havane. Do you want the mic?
Vilina mai me ke aloha nui a ka kua paulua, o wau o Havane, o mauna awa ke a ku'u mauna, o ko hako hau ku'u kaha vai a pu'u kapuai mea noho iku aina kulaiwi aloha no ka kua paulua. My name is Havane, my mountain is Mauna Kea. My river is Kohakuhau, in the land that raised me is Pu'ukapuaime on the island of Hawaii. Offering this oli from Hawaii Nui a Kea to these lands, to all of you, with love and with deep care for these relationships that we foster, and in honor of all of the work that we do for Papa, for Mother Earth. No lai loho I keia leo aloha, kupu eu hou nā moku eu haumea.
Modu eu haume Nua kahila ve bolo leina modu abau Ku ke honua I lau puni na moju. Hawe I kua uli o la ka ainai. O maha e ta leo ta wahine. Ki ka mauna ka honu ai. E hau mea pa I kugala ni opi ta honu ai. Ke kupu e uona motu e hiku. Ka hiki ku ia o Hawaii. Ho I ke mai ke aloha nui puni ka aina. O Hawaii o ke ave mau ia kama. Molo ka inui ahina. O ahu o ka kuhihawa. Kaua I o mano kranipo. Ni hau kapalana o nā moku. Ka ula ku hai moan. Ho I ke gani o ka aina. He balana o ka ula no Hawaii. Ni ho a kuhi puone. Ala, ano, apa, ha maulo Hawaii, a mama, ha uanoa, a lele, wale ai.
Mahalo nui. Aloha.
Wonderful, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jay Young. I am the co-director, along with Dave Spencer, of the American Indian Center, who I don't see in here right now, but he's around here somewhere. I am enrolled citizen band Potawatomi ThunderClan, and on my dad's side, I'm Haudenosaunee Seneca Deer Clan. So I was asked to talk about a little bit about the history of this area, because I'm Potawatomi, and the American Indian Center and what we do. So we'll start with the history of this land. As you saw the sign out there, and as Sarah mentioned, this is traditionally Anishinaabe land, which is Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Odawa. This area right here was primarily Potawatomi, the Chicagoland. So the Ojibwe were up north over Lake Superior, and the Odawa were up north over Lake Huron. And traditionally, Potawatomi were in Michigan, and then through the Beaver Wars, we were pushed around Lake Michigan all the way up into Green Bay, where we ran into the Ho-Chunk and the Menominee, got along with them for the most part, and then we spread out along the shores of Lake Michigan here, so that's how we ended up here. Through our stories, we're traditionally from the Seven Fires Prophecy, we're traditionally from like New Brunswick, Canada, actually, on the East Coast. And there's a whole teaching and migration story over a course of about 500 years where the Anishinaabe were one people, and then they split at Lake Huron and the Mackinac Straits, and this is how we became to be. So we were here, we ran into the French in 1630s, got along with them for the most part, established trade routes, whole bunch of history there. I don't have time to get into all that. But in 1821 and 1833, two treaties were made. The Treaty of Chicago, the first one and the second one. The second one is more significant because that ended all native populations in Illinois. All lands were ceded from this area. It wasn't by choice. So I know y'all have heard probably the Trail of Tears, but that's the 5 civilized tribes. Pretty much every tribe east of the Mississippi has a story like that. Potawatomis had about 12 removals from this area. Some were more peaceful, some weren't. My family was in the Potawatomi Trail of Death. My four-time great-grandmother was born in this area, and then she followed Menominee over to Twin Rivers, Indiana, and then they were forcibly removed from that area. It's known as the Potawatomi Trail of Death. 859 Potawatomis were rounded up at gunpoint. Chief Menominee was locked into the back of a wagon. He was brought there under the guise of, we're going to do negotiations. And so that negotiation was locking him in the back of a truck, and then they spent 5 days spreading out, rounding up every Potawatomi or every native they could find, and then moving them out at gunpoint. They burned all the villages, so they had nothing to come back to. Along the trip, about 40 Potawatomis died. When they got to Kansas, which was 600 miles away, there was a cholera outbreak. All the promises of rations and homes, they weren't there. So once they got there, it was in November, so the winter hit, and a lot more died because of cholera and other disease outbreaks. And that was kind of the end of natives in Illinois. There was a residential school that was here out by Des Plaines, St. Mary's. It was a Catholic school. But that was that until 1956, the Indian Relocation Act. So what that was is they were trying to get natives off the res into the city. Chicago is one of the original relocation cities. My mom and dad were moved in the Relocation Act, but they weren't moved to Chicago. They went to Denver out of Oklahoma. But here, natives again were promised, we were promised jobs, we were promised housing, promised all this great stuff, and when we got here, it wasn't there, and we also didn't have our community here. And so some people gathered, and they said, we're gonna make the Indian Center, and that's what we have. This was founded in 1953. We just celebrated our 71st year. And so through that, we gave people who were here, we gave them a home, we gave them a place to community where you could be safe, where you could practice your traditions, your customs, and not be judged or afraid to do that. We got heavy into, we're advocates for Native people. We were part of the Red Power movement in the 60s and 70s. We were part of AIM. We fought for housing, we fought for Native rights, we still do that. Today, we have our food sovereignty program, that's a federal grant we get from the government, where we're looking at indigenous food sovereignty, urban food sovereignty. Because I don't know if you know, but over 70% of natives live in cities. We're not on the res, we're cities, and that's a completely different thing. And so that's what we do here. We teach culture, we do advocacy, we do a lot of education. That's why I'm up here talking to you and telling you about this today. And so I just want you all to know, this is what these homelands are. And if you have any questions, come and talk to me later, because I'll happily go into the history. But my time is almost up, so I just want to say thank you and welcome to the Indian Center.
Abojo Nindawe Magane Doug Binano Kadokwe Indigenous Cause. Greetings, relatives. It's so good to see you all here today. I'm Tina Kukan, Managing Director of our foundation at NDN Collective. We just wanted to take a moment to say miigwech to you and to all of the team here at the center. Dave, as we thought about coming and being part of GIA, which we're very honored to be part of, we reminded ourselves and everyone else that everywhere that you travel on this continent, known as Turtle Island, is Indian country. So we wanted to come to a space that was about community, and so here we are at the Indian Center. We're grateful to you for all that you've done and the hospitality that you've offered to our people. So we just wanted to present something that's very important to us. It's our land back flag. Add to your wall of the Hollow Nations here with our gratitude. Great. Thank you. Great. Now it's my honor to turn it over to our president and CEO, Nick Tilson of NDN Collective.
Hamadakiapi, Nick Tilson, Amachiapi, Chantea Washtenape Chuzapalo. My name is Nick Tilson. I'm Oglala Lakota. I'm the president and founder of NDN Collective. And I'm an organizer. I always say I'm an organizer, accidental president and CEO. So somebody else can have it whenever they overthrow me. So if I did any good job, then one day that will happen. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why, since the inception of NDN Collective, we have been dedicated to supporting indigenous artists. Because NDN Collective grew out of a movement of culture bearers and spirituality. We grew out of a place-based work that we were doing in my home community at Pine Ridge. And we wanted to build a movement organization that changed the conditions in which indigenous people organized. But none of that would have been possible at all if it wasn't if it wasn't artists and culture bearers that were at the centerpiece. I think that sometimes in society we treat art and culture as if it's this thing over here, or something that should be in museums, or something that should be over here, when the reality is that when you engage artists in the process of movement building, in the process of community building, it changes the trajectory of that work. It makes it stronger, it makes it better. I was like, you engage artists, you end up with things that are gooder. Everything is gooder with artists. Because they're the interpreters of our they're the connection to the past, the present, and the future. And we have to take direction from that process. Otherwise, we will chart our course into destruction. Part of the destructive society that we live into today is we ended up here because we stopped taking directions from our artists, from our culture bearers. We stopped valuing them as important catalysts for change. And so, as an organizer, I was taught at a pretty young age that if you're gonna have a movement, you gotta make the movement beautiful, you gotta make it sexy, you gotta make it irresistible. Otherwise, you won't have a movement. You just have a bunch of good ideas. And so artists have always been a part of the work that we have done on the front line. We value the art that's happening on the front line and the messaging and that work the same that we value, first-class films and Emmy Award winning films like the Lakota Nation versus the United States that just got an Emmy Award, last week. In this project in particular, the Radical Imagination, we put out a challenge. We started the conversation about what does the future look like when we win? What does the future look like when we win? And also, let's also be real, we're also redefining what winning means too. Because even this idea of winning is binary thinking. And how do we get away from this binary thinking and getting more into a holistic thinking? And so a Radical Imagination program was really about making investments into artists and having the conversation about what does the future look like when we win? What does it look like through many different art forms when the dams start to get tore down that prevented the salmon from running? When the buffalo that was killed gets returned back to the people? When the languages that they tried to wipe out are being revitalized? When Mother Earth's soil starts to get restored? When the people, build unity and power? What does that look like? And that's the premise of this, because we wanted to build that future and make it very clear what we are fighting for. Because we're organizing to win. We're organizing to make sure that the revolution we build creates a radically different future for generations to come. But we have to invest into that. And you have to invest and you have to value artists into doing that. And that's why NDN Collective, I think 40% of the staff that work at NDN Collective are artists. 40% of the 100 staff that we have there are artists in some way, shape, or form. That's not an accident, And so through this program, we've been able to support artists, and we moved to multi-year supporting of artists, letting them unleash. It's really hard to create a program because I was like, well, just radically imagine, what it takes. It's like, because you don't want to create parameters for artists, because naturally artists will push the envelope anyway, But it really has helped us think about what that looks like. And in the land back movement, land back isn't just a movement that says, oh, we want our land back and that's the end of it. The reality is land back is an opportunity to radically envision a future. When we return indigenous lands back into indigenous hands, what does that future look like? What does that world look like? What is the power of that look like? How does that help us fight climate change? How does that help us achieve justice? And so, this movement is that's what it's about. And so our support of artists to do that has been part of the fundamental work that we do here at NDN Collective for building indigenous power. And so It's an honor to support artists in this way. It's an honor to support artists, honestly, in every one of our programming areas at NDN Collective, whether we're organizing on the front lines, investing into artists directly, or to the amazing storytellers that we have. So thank you all for giving me a few minutes here to talk, and thank you for the artists for radically imagining the future that we're fighting for. Hecha tualo.
Thank you so much, Nick, for those opening words. I also want to extend deep gratitudes to the American Indian Center, to both Dave and Jay. Jay, thank you so much for your words and grounding us in the space that we're in. And also big gratitude and appreciation to Havani for your beautiful song, your voice. One of the things that we talk about here with our art as Indigenous people is that we bring out the techniques of our ancestors. We bring the vibrations, the prayer through our song and through our voices. And we're really honored to be able to share some of that with all of you guys here today. And again, recapping what we're going to be doing, we're going to be hearing from they're featuring a selection of some of the folks from our 5th cohort of Radical Imagination Artists. And to recap again, the Radical Imagination Artist Grant honors and awards 10 Indigenous artists each year with a one-year grant for the past 5 years, but we're now evolving the grant to now be a 2-year award cycle. So we're really proud to do that. And one of the things that is really important about art for Indigenous people is that it is essentially a prayer. It is expression. It is speaking to ancestors. It is how we relate to each other, to the land. But for our artists, they have a really unique purpose. The artists that are featured here today, for the Radical Imagination Artist Grant, they were called upon to or not called upon, their calling in many ways is to radically imagine this better world. And we look at the root of the word radical, and it does mean to get to the root of something, to interrogate the soil, to challenge systems, to confront colonialism, to confront extraction, to unapologetically and courageously defend our land and our people and what we care about. And so all of the artists that we're going to hear today are fierce in that way. They're powerful in that way. And so with that, I want to hand it over to our first presenter, Gabriela Spears-Rico, who is going to be sharing some of her poetry, but I want to do a quick introduction for Gabriela. So Gabriela Spears-Rico is a Puripacha and Pirinda poet from Charo, Michoacan, Mexico. Her work has been featured in numerous publications, including Sing, Poetry from the Indigenous Americas, and at cultural institutions such as the El Palacio de Bellas Artes and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Spears-Rico's poetry reflects both the working class aesthetic of her upbringing as well as the insurgent indigeneity of her political positioning. Her work addresses questions of cultural resurgence and autonomy, building among Indigenous communities in Michoacan, and her personal journey as a transnational Indigenous migrant woman navigating poverty, displacement, and the reconnection to homeland. So please welcome Gabriela.
Is this microphone on now? Can y'all hear me? Okay, great, thank you. Today I want to share 4 interventions that I have made, actually 3 because of time, 3 interventions that I have made with my poetry that I consider representative of my development and relevance as a scholar poet. The first example came from a collaboration with Ojibwe artist Andrea Carlson, who's actually local here to Chicago now, for a documentary she produced titled Let, an Act of Reverse Incorporation. This project invited community members from groups which have been excluded from museum spaces, such as Indigenous people, or who have been used problematically in museum spaces, such as Indigenous people, to respond to artwork displayed by the Minneapolis Institute of Art within their permanent collection. The MIA supported the project and invited selected community members to rewrite wall texts from our own perspectives. I chose to respond to this Maya pot, dated circa 750, which was originally described solely according to its functionality. My wall text, titled Decolonized Wall Text for a Maya Chocolate Pot, juxtaposed the American demand for and widespread consumption of chocolate with the displacement and forced migration of Maya descendant communities caused by U.S. intervention in Central America. And as a Mesoamerican woman, this was important to me. And I will go ahead and hopefully they have my video queued so you can watch it within the documentary itself. This Maya pot, dated circa 750, is a testament to Maya ingenuity in agriculture, art, and cuisine, and pottery. Innovators in the production of cacao, as well as accomplished architects and astronomers, Mayas gifted the world what we know today as chocolate, a delectable treat that is exported and consumed worldwide. Mayas were amongst the first cultivators and drinkers of chocolate. Cacao beans were so valued that chocolate was typically reserved for the consumption of leaders, and the beans were used as currency. Today, the world continues to indulge in the richness of chocolate, though not everybody credits Maya ingenuity or indigenous peoples as the original cultivators of cacao. Instead, Maya people were continuously dispossessed, displaced, and slaughtered by various entities and in different time periods, starting with Spanish colonialism and an attempted genocide as recent as the late 20th century, when thousands of Mayas were disappeared and killed as a result of the Guatemalan Civil War. In the United States, we currently consume 18% of the world's chocolate, yet continue to mistreat and neglect Maya immigrants, many who are refugees from the Guatemalan Civil War, a war with which our government was complicit by training and equipping Guatemalan security forces. Americans spend $18.27 billion on chocolate annually, yet both the Democrat and Republican parties have continuously denied asylum to Central American refugee children fleeing the violence left by the legacy of civil war. Nearly 16% of the U.S. labor force consists of Latino workers, and Latino workers contribute $124 billion in federal taxes annually. Yet conservative political leaders call us rapists and criminals, and others claim to support immigration reform while unabashedly shutting the door on the unaccompanied minors who are the descendants of these great Mesoamerican civilizations. People are happy to celebrate the accomplishments of dead Indians while denying the existence and humanity of living ones. Last year, more than 7,000 Central American children were deported, many of them of Maya descent, and many of them sent back to their deaths. But I digress. Let's all continue to relish in the delicious taste of chocolate brought to you by the brilliance of the ancient Maya. So that's probably not a wall text that you would see at a museum, but mine was on display for 2 years. With this intervention, I critiqued the idea that Mesoamerican objects are artifacts to be gazed at by Western audiences and museums. Instead, my poem about the chocolate pot insisted that these objects mean something to Latinx and indigenous communities, and that while museums and their audiences value Mesoamerican marvels, they do not consider contemporary indigenous political agendas and needs when collecting and displaying these pieces. The second intervention, well, actually, I'll just mention this one briefly. I won the Sidewalk Poetry Contest in the city of St. Paul, and this is one of my poems that's actually displayed on sidewalks in St. Paul as of today. And this one, I critique the idea that art, it has to be high art, and poetry in and of itself is very accessible to the working class. This is engaged with as people walk along the sidewalk, and I'm very proud of that. The next intervention I wish to make, sorry, actually, I need to go back to, okay, yeah, this one. The next intervention I wish to make is my poem on fibers, which is displayed here next door in the gallery, that I wrote after I attended and participated in the protests that toppled the Columbus statue in St. Paul, Minnesota, our Minnesota state capital, in June of 2020, during the racial uprising that took place there after the police murder of George Floyd. The poem, which I read last night, bears witness to the Black, Native, and Latinx solidarity, or what I view as the fibers between people that made a zestful summer of diffusive resistance possible in the Twin Cities, where I live and work. My poem connects the human fibers, the people coming together, to the material composite fibers that make up rope, to consider how the same tool that was once used to lynch Black, Native, and Mexican bodies is being used to pull down monuments of the men who enacted the genocide upon these bodies in an embodied and collective call to end white supremacy. Lastly, I want to share this recent intervention, which is on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Commissioned by the Met, I produced a museum label in response to Thomas Crawford's 1848 sculpture pictured here, Mexican Girl Dying, which you can see on this slide. The sculpture is periodically exhibited in the American wing of the museum. Sculpted by a white American male sculptor in commemoration of Hernan Cortes's 1521 invasion of Mexico and created shortly after the U.S.-Mexico War in 1848, this piece is a white male indulgence in settler fantasies that take up genocide as leisure, as sport. The sculpture portrays an Aztec Mexica princess in a headdress, fallen and wounded, dying after being pierced by the lance of a conquistador. As an indigenous feminist, I read the sculpture as stripping this native woman of agency and as a metaphor for how indigenous women's bodies are extensions of land in imperial expeditions of conquest. I created a label which directly confronts these tropes and wonders out loud what this imagined woman's own desires and journey were, granting her agency and giving sovereignty to her body within the captive circumstances imagined here by Crawford. I will read the label to you. The noble maiden is demure, lying in a sexually available position, her nose and chin pointed aimlessly at the sky in a sign of resignation. Her right hand gently cups the bare wound under her breast, while her left clutches a cross, a final attempt towards her salvation. She dies, forlorn, a casualty of the conquistador lance that pierced her sinews, welcoming the New World, Christianity, and civilization. But what of her own voyage, of her people's war to resist foreign occupation? Mexica woman, land, imagined as disposable flesh ripe for violation. What does she yearn for in her own wayfaring, pre-Cartesian invasion? Here we are all Malinches, frozen in time, being chiseled and gazed at by white men's exploitation. In this presentation, I shared a bit about my poetic craft and how it is inseparable from the interventions I make as a scholar. I argue that poetics have been part of indigenous feminist intellectual production since Christos, Joy Harjo, Adrienne Rich, Cherie Moraga, and Audre Lorde started theorizing and publishing from their own kitchen tables. The poetry and the theory they were producing emerged from the flesh, as Moraga theorized, and or was always felt theory, as is currently taken up by Athabascan scholar Dion Millian. I see my own intellectual labor as an anthropologist and as a poet contributing to that body of work. I see my poetry as providing a way for La Indígena to speak back to settler colonialist narratives that erase, exotify, and commit violences against people of color and indigenous people more generally, and Mesoamerican people specifically. Our scholarship as women of color and as indigenous women thinkers is always applied. It is inseparable from the experiences of our communities and from the futures of our pueblos. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. She really, truly embodies that fierceness of confronting colonialism that is so necessary. And one of the things I also want to very quickly mention is that in this cohort, in this 5th cohort of our Radical Imagination artists, there are 5 of 10 are indigenous to Mexico, with 3 of them currently residing in Mexico. And that really also represents how NDN Collective, with our work, although we are a US-based organization, we seek to empower and support indigenous people beyond colonial borders and what we call Turtle Island. We know that there was cultural diffusion, sharing, trade, also even alliances that took place across those colonial borders that we see today. And so we're really honored to support our family, our relatives in Mexico for the Radical Imagination Artist Grant. Next up, we're going to go to our next presentation from Larry McNeil. So just as Gabriela is confronting colonialism in a lot of her work, it is of equal importance for indigenous artists to root us in the present, to represent ourselves when we know that we're coming from a reality of non-Indigenous people telling our stories for us, non-Indigenous photographers like Edward S. Curtis, distorting who we are. And so Larry, in his work, in some really unique and creative ways, really roots us in this contemporary reality that we're in with his skill as a photographer and a visual artist. So I'll quickly introduce Larry. Larry McNeil, Tlingit Nisga'a of USA and Canada, makes art that is a visual manifestation of the provocative times in which we live. McNeil's art is about the intersection of cultures, American mythology, irony, satire, and embodies a distinctive sense of Indigenous identity. He often uses the raven as a mythological creature who does visual discussions about global catastrophic heat and a rapidly changing ecosystem. So please welcome Larry to the stage.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here. It is our honor to have you here. So welcome, and please feel free to come up and chat with any of us, as we're here. And check out the gallery too. So please, go see what's there. So it's really nice. They did a lot of work to make sure that you had some actual art to see. And yeah, thank you. I really enjoy being here. It's so nice. And you know what made me feel real at home was this, the Indian Center, where the local indigenous people from all over, they come and they try to make you feel welcome too, so by all means. I've been I like to acknowledge fellow indigenous artists too, because they have been taught by their ancestors, so their ancestors, have been artists for thousands of generations, and we're just the most current incarnation, so that's really nice. I really love that part of it. And I like talking to the other artists too, because they talk about how their grandmothers, helped them along and so forth. And, in my own family, it's matrilineal. So I was taught by my mother and grandmother, so, and so is anybody going to be in Santa Fe this fall? No? Well, oh, cool. So I got work in 2 shows there. There's at the New Mexico Museum of Art, we've got work there, and there's a gallery and another one called Photo Santa Fe. So by all means, please go check them out. And where's the clicker? Oh, it's right behind me. Yeah, and this is one of my earlier works that I did, titled Man in the Bear Clan. I really loved working in my own community, so my own tribe, when I was young, they would commission me to do work, which was really nice, because, hey, when you're a young artist, it's hard to make a living as an artist. And so my own tribe stepped in, and when it was hard to get grants and so forth, and sell your work to museums, they stepped up, and they commissioned me. So this is one of the portraits that I did for them. They actually turned it into a Percent for Art program, which was nice, so it allowed local young artists to, get art commissions and, start making a living as an artist. And this was, I did a collaboration with a guy named David Michael Kennedy in Santa Fe, so I credit him too, because he had one of the only darkrooms in the country that makes big palladium prints. By big, I mean like that big. So that's a really big size for a palladium print. And this one's called Sacred Power Pole. Can you read the words on it? I'm not sure. Yeah. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, because I was asked to do, I was invited to some shows, and some of them had things like, asking for sacred work, and I started to feel a little self-conscious about it, because I didn't feel like I was the sacred guy. so I thought, okay, I can deliver some sacred artwork for you guys. so I started making some sacred work, especially for them, and part serious too, though, because, this is what we see every day. And this is what I saw on the freeway between Santa Fe and Albuquerque. Oops. And this one's titled Fly Don't Walk. I made this when I lived in San Francisco. It was showing at the American Indian Contemporary Arts Gallery, which was on 2nd Street. And it was such a cool gallery. It doesn't exist anymore. But you know, one of the beauty of it was it allowed young artists to start their careers, young indigenous artists, you know. So, and it was cool because for the first time ever, I had collectors. I was going, wow, I never thought that would happen. So there's a guy who lived in, he was a high-tech guy in Silicon Valley, and he used to come to our openings, and he'd go straight to my work. He bought everything I made. So he still has this one in his collection, so I really love that. You got the humor. This was for a billboard, was commissioned in Albuquerque. They're asking about, well, they just left it up to me. That was really cool too. I really love that part, you know, having complete freedom to do whatever you want. So mine was where I'm from in Alaska, Tlingit and Nisga'a. We have Raven is part of the creation story. So I wanted to bring Raven into the 21st century. So I got him some Ray-Bans, you know, and you know, it's like, yeah, this is a hip guy, you know, and this was titled "In the True Spirit of White Man," and I'll just read. I write too, so you'll notice that, you know, in my work there's writings. So this came from a journal entry. And I'll just read the first part of it. It says, "In the true spirit of white man, I stole this car in my search for America. Just call it manifested destiny. I asked the owner to take my picture in front of his car before I took it and assured him that it was God's will that I take this car." God meant for this fine machine to be flying down the freeway, I told him. "Are you a real Indian?" I asked. "I thought you were all vanished. As soon as you give me the keys, I'll be another vanishing Indian." So, and it goes so. And this one's titled "First Light Winter Solstice." And this was also part of a Arts and Embassies project. You know, so you guys know about the Arts and Embassies project. You know, it's where you make work for your library, for the American embassies. So I thought, hey, I got a cool idea. So these prints, these lithographs, they're designed to be in American embassies around the world. So I thought, hey, I'm going to make an indigenous one. and yet I had to be a little bit sneaky about it too. So there's a layer of invisible ink on it, and you can't see it when you're looking straight onto the print. But if you go at a 45-degree angle, it names all the indigenous tribes of the Americas, you know, so that's pretty cool. I really loved that part of it. This was a lithograph having to do with the climate crisis, you know. Well, and this was actually, I started making work about the climate crisis in 2007, and I became a bicycle commuter too. So I'd ride my bike to work in the wintertime, you know, in the summertime. And I thought, wow. This is actually south of here. And the title is Demented Coal Paradox. And it's a monumental coal plant. If you look closely, you can see some people walking on the roof, and they just look like they're ant size. So this is huge. I mean, it's monumental. Raven loves cool cars. So I just finished this one a couple months ago. And it's an abandoned steel mill. And I converted, I did some research about the most expensive cars, and that was it. It was a Mercedes Gullwing car. And this was titled Raven Dreamt About Light. This is right by the Antelope coal mine. It's the largest coal mine in North America. I mean, you can see it from space. And this was how it looked. This was the light there. And this one is titled Miss Coyote, Love, Gratitude, and Anvils. And, this is actually out my back door where I live in Idaho. We have nature right outside the back door. So, studio production work. I've got a lot of work in progress here. This is location work and so forth. I do writing. This is a part of the Whitney Museum catalog that I wrote for. And I have a brand new website that just launched yesterday. So I hope you go see it. It's real easy to find. Just called LarryMcNeil.com. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Larry. Absolutely phenomenal and beautiful. What I really appreciate about Larry's work is that you can see a variety of mediums, so many different mediums, taking Indigenous brilliance, satire, creativity, humor, and putting it all together. And one of the unique facets of Indigenous art is we've always made use of the tools and the mediums and the various different trade items, even resources from the land to do our art. And so for contemporary art, it's critical that we position ourselves according to our own definition in these spaces of art to continue to tell the stories of our people, to continue to challenge systems and extraction, things that harm our people, while just being unapologetically ourselves too. And so there's a place and space for that satire, that humor, that creativity, and that always existed for our people. So with that, we're going to move on to the next segment of our session, and we'll get to hear from some of our artists. Some of the panelists that we have are actually all from island nations that we support. And so, like I said, we have, this is our 5th cohort, and each year we get a different combination of folks from across Turtle Island and surrounding island nations. But this is a really unique panel who represent island nations where we know that, we could probably imagine at different points in our lives, like thinking of, these beautiful places to get away and recharge, and they're often islands and island nations that our Indigenous relatives there experience a very unique and acute experience with colonization and occupation. And so we're really honored to be able to support artists to tell stories, to confront, to challenge, to do art, to help us to think differently about those places that we think of as paradise, but that are their ancestral homes. And so, panelists, if you want to go ahead and make your way up, and as you guys are taking a seat, I'll introduce who we have here with us today. So we have Marcus Marzan, Havane Rios, and Chad Martin, all from Hawaii. And then Daniel Cepedas of Guam, and they are musicians, culture bearers, and visual artists who are catalyzing a creative movement for land and water protection and reclamation. So if you could give a warm welcome to our panelists here. Okay, you guys can have a seat. All right, so for today's panel, we're going to be hearing about how their work really seeks to challenge and go beyond what we often hear of as like land acknowledgements. Some of you might have heard land acknowledgements in different ways, and they've really become popular in the last 5 years or so. And that was a start. That was a little scratch of the surface, but we've also learned that those can really be performative. And we want to challenge folks to go beyond that simple acknowledgement and to go deeper. Because remember, with radical imagination, we're going to that root. We're going there unapologetically. And so what we're going to be talking about today is how we go beyond that land acknowledgement and how does real change happen? And how can we take some insight from these artists and hear from them what some of the challenges are from their homelands and help to be good allies and good relatives to moving some of that change forward. So thank you all for being here. It's really been an honor. Yesterday they were all here as well. We had a phenomenal event. And in case you want to check it out, it was actually live streamed, and there is a recording of that on NDN Collective's YouTube and Facebook and Twitter spaces where you can see some of the performances from all of them here. So we'll get started with our first question, and feel free, before you answer the question, to introduce yourselves a little bit more. Because we are a little crunched for time and have just so much that we want to share with you all, we'll do our best to kind of keep our responses pretty short here. But first, my first question is just to kind of ground us in what you're bringing, what your experiences are from your homelands. Can you share with us what are some of the challenges being faced by your communities, and how do you confront that with your art? And we'll go ahead and start with you, Marcus, and you can introduce yourself as well.
Mahalo nui. My name is Marcus Marzan. I'm based on the island of Oahu in Honolulu. I'm a practicing visual artist as well as a museum professional, curator, and cultural advisor for the Bishop Museum in Honolulu. But as a cultural bearer and visual artist, you know, looking at Hawaii as an island, as was mentioned, there are limited resources, and how those resources are utilized is a very tenuous thing, you know, keeping that balance and not exploiting the resources. And I think as a visual artist, recognizing that is a representation of ourselves as a community, as an individual artist, and as a culture. The things that happen to the land are the exact same things that are happening to us as people. So to recognize that, you know, how do we heal the land in a way that we can bring prosperity and vibrancy and growth to that, so that it mirrors ourselves in our own practices, in our own arts forms, in our own culture. I think through my work, that's definitely what I try to imagine, and gratefully to have this support from NDN to think about ways to do that through my own art practice, and bringing that into the cultural world through performance, combination with my visual practice, and bringing those two worlds together. Mahalo.
Thank you, Marcus. And Marcus, some of his work is featured in the gallery. You can see some of his fiber work. It is absolutely phenomenal. And yesterday, I think you invited folks to actually touch the fiber art, correct?
Yeah, I did. So if you have a chance, I know as a museum person, I know what that world means, but as a visual artist, I really enjoy seeing people interact with the works that I create. And actually, all the pieces that I create are for people to wear and use and perform in. So I allow that experience for you all to just have that experience of feeling the pieces that I have in the gallery space.
Thank you so much, Marcus. And then we'll go next over to you, Chad, if you could share some of the challenges being faced and how you confront that with your art.
Aloha mai. My name is Chad Martin. I'm a 20-plus year graphic designer, commissioned illustrator, and fledgling animator. Been doing that for 10 years now, I guess. But a lot of my project is about Vai, the issues with fresh water on, you know, all the islands. I think the most notable one is the Red Hill contamination in there, and that really just sparked a lot of conversation about the other islands. Each island has a different issue, whether it's overbuilding on Oahu Island, selective building on the choice properties of Kauai Island, to, you know, Maui, which is peak water demand most of the year, and the results of that is, you know, catastrophic, obviously. So I'm from Kauai, lived in Oahu for many years, and I'm recently moved to the Hawaii Island, which is full of Vai. The water, when you step on the ground, the water is, the ground's nice and squishy, which I love. How I confront these issues is mostly collaboration, because I am a graphic designer. So I do want to collaborate. NDN really took a chance with me. I pitched a project that incorporated interviews to make like a mini documentary and then overlay with my art as well. So it's just a piece of it. It's a 16-minute piece that's in the gallery right now, but it's actually a pretty large project with a lot of interviews, and it's actually going to be a lifelong project. I don't know if you guys know that. This is going to be a part of what I'm distributing through YouTube and Patreon. I love Patreon, by the way. We can talk about that later with everybody else, but it's a great project. And then collaboration, I like to use a lot of power symbols, and you know, just kind of use like the flower of life. My jacket alone is like the seed of life with a turtle design on the back, so it's kind of empowering. And the shirt here is a collaboration done with the help of NDN with another project using the Olelo Noiawa, a song of wisdom about Vai itself, which is also shown in the video. So yeah, collaboration and interactivity. Sorry, real quick. So I do have like stickers hidden around here having to do with a creature. And you know, if you look a Vai is a good hint of where you might find them.
Thanks so much, Chad. So I know that you mentioned Chad's animation is in the gallery. If folks don't have enough time to watch all of it, is there another way that they can follow and support your work?
Yeah, you can follow me on patreon.com/makaiwa, MAKAIWA. It should come up in the QR code. And then I also do have a YouTube channel that teaches basic Olelo Hawaii called Makaiwa Keiki. All you got to do is type in Hawaiian language for kids on YouTube and you'll find it.
Thanks so much, Chad. And you reminded me of something very important that I forgot to name earlier. There was a QR code up on the screen. It might pop up again. You could scan that code to learn more about our artists and the panelists. And so some of the things that they're mentioning and naming, if you want to make sure that you can see their work in some form or another, whether it's in the gallery or following them on social media or their websites, that would be really, really helpful. At NDN Collective, we know that we're just a small blip in the lifespan of these artists, and we're so honored to support them in that year of being a part of the cohort, but they need investment and support long-term so they could continue doing this work. So please follow the artists and support them in the best ways that you can. Next, we'll go over to Havane. So if you could tell us about a little, how you're confronting challenges of your homelands with your art. One thing I want to say really super quickly that I don't know that we did yesterday is that one thing really powerful about Havane and her mother is that they were actually in Standing Rock. I remember that, and that really signifies this allyship that we have as Indigenous people with each other. We know that there's fights on the ground in Hawaii as well, that we show up and support our relatives there with as well. So Havane, if you could share with us a little bit more about some of the challenges in your homelands.
Mahalo piha, and valina ho mai me ke aloha nui a kākoa pauloa. My mom always says there's a issue for every minute of the day that we face in Hawaii. And as we know, as Indigenous people, we're constantly fighting oppression and being minorities in our own homelands. And I find that being and living is a part of showing up and reclaiming space, just being here, just breathing right now, and choosing this life, choosing these songs, choosing these chants, and knowing that they're choosing us too. I always say that somebody throughout time and space saved our stories, kept speaking our language, kept singing songs, kept chanting, kept being proud of who we are, and kept that connection to our aina so that we could one day learn from that and heal with that. And so we see that there's no consent. People look at us as a stereotype and place us as kanaka, as something of the past. Speak about us as Hawaiians used to be. We used to do this. We were this. As if we're not still living, as if we're not still evolving our culture, evolving our traditions, as if we're not a living culture. And so to be affirmed as we are still here. We are still wanting connection to our own land, still wanting to live on our own land, while being pushed aside. Hawaii is one of the most expensive places to live in all of the occupied US. It is so hard for us to stay home and to just even survive being home. And so we're just trying to live while trying to protect our own land, and even having to do that. And what comes with that is the pain, the struggle, the constant trauma of saying no. You're not allowed to build at the top of my mountain, and for that no to not be heard. And there's so many nuances to that and so many connections to that, from the micro to the macro. As a Kanaka Hawaii who is brown and queer, I have learned in my life that my no isn't enough. When I say no, that's not enough. And so the way that I confront that in my music and in my chant is I affirm my autonomy, my sovereignty, and recognize that when I live from a place of mana and from Mauliola, and when I affirm my own no, you cannot build on my mountain, and I sing that and I dream that, that is a reflection of my ancestors around me and surrounding me saying, I stand with you. And I know that because I told you these stories and I passed down these stories of so many of our people in our lineage that loved this mountain. We protect our mountain. And so we learn from our stories that say this mountain is sacred. And so from that space, I say, I know that this mountain is sacred because I'm a descendant of this mountain. And so me living that and being that and passing that down to our children through our songs, through our chants, is a way to say, I'm still here. And so I sing that knowing that what we sing and what we chant and what we keep in our language is a record. It's a recording of our histories, of what is happening right now. And that is the way that, as an oratory people, that we continue to keep our wisdom and knowledge. And so I know that it's a responsibility as a singer, as a songwriter, to record what is happening now in hopes that the people that are going to come after us will say, okay, they said that we were supposed to do this for our land, and it's a responsibility for our land, so we're going to do this for our next 7 generations. Mahalo.
Beautiful, that unapologetic knowing. I love that. Just really kind of gave me chills as I was listening to as well. And Havane, as a singer, you know, bringing her ancestral language, that voice, that breath has really been just a blessing to experience here as well. So thank you so much, Havane. I'm hearing from another singer, Daniel. Daniel also performed here yesterday. So please, again, if you didn't get a chance to check that out when you leave here, maybe you can check it out on your drive home. The second half of the programming yesterday was our performances, and so you can actually hear from Marcus and Havane and Daniel, who all shared song yesterday as well. But Daniel, now going over to you, can you share with us how in Guam, in your homelands, as a Chamorro person, how do you confront various challenges with your work?
Thank you. Buenas and hafade todo hanzu. Yeah, my name's Daniel, and my work is as a multimedia artist is primarily based around the art of storytelling, primarily in music, but also video and visual art as well. World building is kind of like the way that I describe what I feel called to do. And as a Chamorro person, you know, Chamorro people have dealt with a lot. Just like a lot of the people in this room, you know, our ancestors survived a lot for us to be here, right? In my folks' case, we're talking about 4 different colonial empires over the course of many centuries, right? And I only bring that up because, like Havane was saying, there are so many different aspects of colonization that our communities face. And for me, what I feel called to center my work around is this notion of identity, right? Because I think if you know who you are as people, you can navigate each one of those individual issues as you're able to. And we talk a lot about in the Chamorro community about our identity crisis, right? Not knowing who we are, different art forms, dance, music. I was speaking yesterday about how music, you know, our musical traditions that we have only go back a couple generations, right? And I think there's a lot of artists, a lot of creators who are wondering, like, where do we create from? What do we pull from? Who are we? And for me, the most honest way that I can connect with who I see ourselves to be, which is what I imagine a lot of folks here would say, which is our identity starts with our connection of land and water. And for us, there's been so many centuries of interruptions to that, right? And distortions of that notion. Every time I talk about Guam with somebody who maybe isn't as connected, like the first things that get brought up usually are the military bases, right? And I feel called to create music and tell stories from a place where these things are kind of subtextual. This notion of indigenous futurism on our homelands is kind of a given, and one of the more literal ways that I try to promote who we are is Zanifinota, like with our language, which is, there's a lot of people who are doing really important work to try to keep that language alive. And, you know, Marcus and I were having a conversation last night about how our ancestral languages are, in some ways, the code of our cultures, right? It's a reflection, it's an embodiment of how our ancestors connected with our land and with our water. And learning and speaking our native languages is a way of keeping that spirit and that consciousness and that identity alive. And so I just feel very grateful to those in our community who have kept the language alive and make it an accessible thing to try to, for us to learn, because I wouldn't be able to do my work without theirs. And so I think that's how I primarily try to shift our cultural consciousness is just to promote what's always been there. What I see is kind of the essence of our identity and who we are, and hopefully in a subconscious, both conscious and subconscious way that can kind of like anchor our communities in our land, in our sea, and in our culture together, so that we can navigate all of these individual challenges more effectively.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. And I like that you mentioned multimedia. Many of these artists are, and many of the folks in this room are artists of various different mediums. So shifting to our next question, one of the things that as Indigenous people we experience often is this idea of invisibility. Part of the colonial project was not just to commit genocide against our people, but to really attempt to rewrite the story, to package things up and dress it up in a way that hides what happened to us, hides our existence still today. And so that's a very unique dynamic that we continue to navigate over and over. And that's in part what the land acknowledgement was for, was to say, oh, we're here, we're standing on other people's lands. But we navigate that every day. And so for our artists, for our closing question, I'd like for you all to share some reflections on what it's like for you to navigate visibility and invisibility as an artist on a regular basis. And then also, how does that connect with how there's an intentional invisibilization of what is happening to the land and waters of your nations as well? And so we'll start again with you, Marcus.
Thank you for that. For me, as a fiber knowledge bearer, you know, drawing upon those skills that have been passed down from generation to generation, and not just utilizing them in the form that they served within the community as utilitarian things of parts of the culture, drawing those elements and techniques into different conversations that are relevant for our communities today. So in many instances, like my fellow colleagues on the stage, bringing them into performance, into dance, into different ceremonial practices, drawing those conversations into these very special and intentional and purposeful moments, and making it obvious and solidify that representation of our ancestral stories and value systems through those techniques and through those materials. I think definitely that's what I see as a visibility, making those particular practices that oftentimes aren't necessarily the forefront of community. They are the backstage people that make things happen. They're the things that support. They're the things. They're not the things that are pushed up front. So to make those elements and techniques the centerpiece of protocols and events is something that I hope to do. And for me, that idea of we have a Hawaiian proverb, "Iko mamua, iko mahope." That which is of the past is what guides us to the future. Yeah, so the things that have happened in the past is what will be for the future. And if we look at it from that perspective, we already know where we will end up. You know, that aspirational kind of understanding. We know the stories and achievements of our ancestors, and we look to those achievements and that vision that we remember and perpetuate within our families and our stories as the thing we wish for our future generations, and finding these different ways to solidify those connections and bring those ancient stories into the present and hopefully push those into the consciousness of our future generations is something that I try to practice through my work. And again, through the use of techniques that you see in the gallery pieces that I have here, not just using the traditional materials and customary materials of our islands and lands, but finding new materials that can add to the story. You know, we are a collective community. It's not just Hawaii on its own anymore. It is a blending of communities and peoples, and adding everyone's story together to uplift the spirit and energy and mo'olelo of place of Hawaii, but also recognize everyone else that make the story of Hawaii what it is today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Marcus. And Chad?
I just believe that just having a place like this to share and come out with the support of NDN to share my story, because I've considered myself like a blacksmith of art. Like you said, there's people in the background helping out and stuff, like Havane herself. Like if there's a front line to this spiritual war, it's 10 feet behind her, you know what I mean? So, and then Marcus is definitely an ambassador. He's traveled the world and he's got interesting invites to awesome places that I'll let him explain. And of course, Daniel's an innovator. His music is awesome and new but welcoming at the same time. So this opportunity itself is to, and of course our other artists are amazing. So this is a great opportunity to do this. Having the relationships with grants and supporting artists from me, who's like incorporating invisibility really fosters the self-doubt of an artist. So like I seen Ku'ale, I did some art for her and I was like, I could have did that better, you know? So just having the support of grant, it's a symbiotic relationship for real, you know? And like I said, it's also lifelong. This might have a time frame and the next generation of, next round of artists will come through, but I'm with NDN for life, you know what I mean? So just fostering the support, having relationships with the grant makers definitely helps, yes.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to support your work as well. Havani.
Mahalo nui. Navigating this invisibility and visibility as, someone, again, who lives as a minority in my own home is something that, like, I've struggled with, wanting to see more of our people on mainstream spaces, wanting to see more representation of who we really are and not just a stereotype of who we are, and recognizing that we're not a monolith. There's so many different ways that we continue being who we are through our art, and making room for that diversity of how we feel our stories and how we express our stories through all of the different mediums of art that we are called to. And so for me, I look back and I see how you're speaking about identity, how so much of that is connected to reclaiming ceremony, reclaiming prayer space, and so much of the repair of my identity comes from looking to our own ancestral prayers, our own ancestral and traditional ways of living and being and healing, because there's so much that we have to heal from in this life. And so for my work and what I am called to do is to restore our haleo papa, our hale haumea, the space for women to bleed, to birth, to heal, and to do that through looking to what we've had to heal from just in the last 10 years, which is being on the front line constantly and having to face this this pain of needing to show up physically to say no, you know, like I had said before, and what the work of the front line looks like and what it means. And so this grant that, you know, NDN has gifted us has helped me to bring rites of passage, healing journeys for the women on the front line who have PTSD and who are deeply hurting from having to do this work constantly. And so looking at what it means to heal together, looking what it means to sing together again and to chant together and to look at chant as a medicine, to look at our own oli, our own voice as a medicine is the way that I feel that like our art and our own kino holds us and loves us and helps us to face all of these challenges that we do, and to be able to be here and to exchange with one another in song, in ha, in breath is healing to our DNA and healing to ourselves. And I feel that being here. So thank you again for bringing us here, and mahalo NDN for loving us, you know, in this way so that we can support this work, support our communities, and be able to share in sacred solidarity together. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Havani, and it's just been an honor to be a part of this experience, hearing your beautiful voice as well and how you speak to that. Daniel, we'll close out with a reflection from you on what it's been like for you to navigate visibility, invisibility, and as an artist, and then also how you see that in relation to the invisibility of what's happening to your homelands.
Sainamasi. One thing I reflect a lot on as an artist and as somebody who, you know, in conventional spaces for art is presented with the question of whether or not to lead with this idea of whether to label myself as an indigenous artist or just an artist is, you know, what the subtext of those questions means and what it implies too. I would love to see a world where indigenous artists don't have to lead with this, or hopefully aren't forced to want to lead with these ideas that my art must reflect these things, you know, these things that our community needs to be talking about, right? Because as artists, our worlds are much more expansive than just our pain, than just the things that we need to immediate responses to. So, yeah, I think a lot about how, as indigenous folks, when we're navigating things that we need more visibility around, the different ways of connecting with other communities, right? And you can connect with people through the head, and you connect people through people with the heart, and I think so much of what the boots on the ground activism is accomplishing is the cognitive connection, right? And I feel that a lot of what our duty is as artists is the connection through the heart. And so for me, I would love a world where indigenous artists are able to imbue the humanity of our experiences through our art too, and not just have to, you know, fight the same battle that our boots on the ground activists are, even though there's so much overlap between those two worlds, of course. But these are the things that inspire me a lot as an artist who, you know, likes the idea of connecting with people through the worlds that we build, through the art that we create, and then maybe later in their, you know, listening our connection experience, learning is like, hey, this person actually has, you know, their background is indigenous to this territory, this island, this tribe, and then having that kind of be the zoom out point from an experience where whether through music or through art or storytelling or whatever it is, having that person feeling seen by the art first, so that we see each other through the art as human beings first, and then zooming out to these things that they may or may not have been aware of, they may or may not have agreed with us on, but at least before we've considered that in our connection with each other, they have a window into our humanity, and vice versa. Hopefully they feel seen in that experience too. So I think, yeah, these are the things that my heart dwells on a lot as an artist and a storyteller, and inherently as we're all elevated into the world as ambassadors of our community, yeah, ways that we can navigate that.
So beautiful.
Nagamasi.
Thank you, Daniel. I think what I hear and what really resonates with me too is in your reflection is that Indigenous people are dynamic, we're complex, and we're also very, very human. And part of the Colonial Project was to dehumanize us, to really connect on a human level, really uplifts and also embodies this belief that we're all related, and we all share in this human experience on this Mother Earth. We're not as separate as we think that we are. In so many of our Indigenous languages and teachings, we believe that. We live that we are very much related. But just want to say thank you to our panelists for all of your beautiful reflections. They're so brilliant. And so when you invest in Indigenous artists, you're investing in these forward-thinking, deep-thinking, brilliant creators that have so much to offer, so many different mediums, so many stories to tell, and so many unique experiences, things for us to think about and mull over and reflect on that for days we're thinking of. And so if you could give a round of applause to our panelists, thank you so much. And then also to our presenters, Larry and Gabriela in the back. We were really fortunate to have 6 of our 10 Radical Imagination artists join us in person. Yesterday, we got to see some virtual presentations from the 4 who were not here. And so we also extend our gratitude to those 4 artists as well who were not able to be with us. And to close out too, I just want to also extend gratitude to the American Indian Center of Chicago, to the Grant Makers in the Arts Conference, to Nick Tilson, Indian Collective's president and CEO, who dreamed up this vision as a creative himself to radically imagine what it would look like to create this organization that could resource and fund our own people to self-determine their own work without the confines and the extra red tape of what some grants can really be for our people. And so much gratitude to Nick. And then I also want to acknowledge the NDN Foundation staff here. These are the staff members who manage all of our grant work, including the Radical Imagination Artist Grant and all of our other grants. And so if we can have the NDN Foundation and all NDN Collective staff members stand, and so that we can acknowledge you and give a wave, let us know who you are. These are phenomenal change makers and artists themselves. They truly are amazing. And thank you to our sound team, our sound crew, and we're just so honored that you join us. And we know that you all are a part of this conference as well, because you also deeply, and I'm preaching to the choir, you understand how important art is, but art for Indigenous people, there's a unique responsibility that comes along with that as well. And so it's really, truly been our pleasure to be a part of this programming with you all. With that, we'll wrap up, and I do want to say, make sure that with the extra few minutes you have, check out that gallery and grab some food. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a really good day.